What is up, you guys? Welcome to Word First Radio, the podcast brought to you by Word First Ministries. As always, I'm your host, Jacob O'Neill, and I'm joined by my good friends, Bailey and Cameron.
Hey.
Bailey, can you start us off with prayer?
Yep. God Almighty, as we continue our discussion on evangelism and specifically what it looks like for us here, I just pray that you'd be with us, that you'd make us wiser and open our minds so that we don't hold on to ideas and things that we already have. God, I just pray that we would come to you open-minded and that we would learn something today from our discussion. So Lord, we love you. We dedicate this time to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about evangelism, and that's such a broad topic.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that in the first episode where we discussed this. But, you know, some of the things that I've been hearing from people, in fact, someone just asked me just the other day, they asked me, is anyone getting saved out there?
Yeah.
Like, what's your actual evangelism strategy in Norway? So that's kind of something we really wanted to talk about. That involves, you know, a big fancy term called missional community, which we'll get into, and church planting. Where we're from, evangelism, you know, most of the time when most people think about evangelism, they think about like street preaching and like, street preaching or street witnessing, like walking up to strangers while they're eating their lunch or dinner or something like that.
Taking the youth group to the beach to witness to people.
Right.
Sure.
Oh my gosh. That's so much fun. That's
fun's the word we all think of when we describe that thing.
That's the word I think of when I describe that
You
thing.
are not normal, but that's why you're here.
That was mean. Okay.
Everybody needs a thumb, and you...
That was so mean. I love it. Okay. Anyways, so everyone needs a thumb. Is what we're talking
Everybody
about.
needs a thumb.
Okay. All right. So I understand those questions. We get those questions every now and then. But when we're doing missions work and when you've uprooted your family and go into a different country in a different context, evangelism, especially when you're playing the long game, kind of looks differently. So we are interested. We're going to talk about kind of our strategy. But Cameron, why don't you talk about kind of speak into church planting and kind of our long game strategy, like in a broad sense. Like,
we've talked about this a whole lot, so it's going to be difficult for me to talk about our vision and then not get so excited that we talk for a long time, but also for it not to be so vague that anybody who's listening or watching doesn't know what we're talking about.
Here's words that they don't know the definition.
Right, I do sound like a politician, right?
Yeah.
We're going to do everything better and the goals are going to be good and whatever. So I'll do my best. So evangelism, like we talked about last time, evangelism is making the lost aware of the good news of salvation. I think that's maybe the simplest way of putting it. And there are lots of strategies for doing that. And our main strategy is going to be church planting. And church planting is one of those Christian-y words that just means starting churches. And there are lots of reasons why church planting is our primary strategy. We'll talk about that. But I think that the beginning of our vision is planting churches. And then the end of the vision is we want to be sending Norwegians to plant churches in Norway and abroad. So those are that's sort of the starting line and the finish line. The starting line is planting a church. The finish line is for that church to be reproducing and creating Norwegian-led churches with Norwegian pastors who are also sending church-planting pastors in Norway and abroad. So maybe that's the most condensed way for me to talk about our church-planting vision, and we can spend hours and years sort of fleshing that out and discussing what exactly we think that looks like. And
Let's spend at least 1 hour talking about it.
We've got a lot of learning to know exactly what that looks like. But that's the idea. I mean, we've talked about we're American and we're never not going to be. And we don't have any, we suffer no illusion that the challenges facing Norway's spiritual state are that there aren't enough Americans with American-style churches, right? Like we're doing it right and just nobody has ever thought, go see what they're doing in America and do that.
Sure.
So that's never going to go away. And we don't want to delude ourselves into thinking that what we're used to doing, like our church experience, is going to solve the spiritual problem of Norway. Never mind, their church experience has lasted 1,000 years longer than ours has. So probably they have some wisdom for us. But the idea is this: I think we begin with a church, and it'll look a certain kind of way. And what that church is going to be dedicated to is identifying and developing Norwegian pastors, because Jacob, as we've talked to like our co-ministers, as we've talked with people about what it is we're going to be doing, you make this excellent point, which is God knows that Norway needs pastors,
right?
And that the call of pastor transcends culture and it transcends borders and boundaries. So God knows that those people are here. We therefore, or knows that those people are needed in his church. He's called them. So we know that they are here. And so we want to commit ourselves to finding and identifying and then equipping them to lead a church well that then is going to be dedicated to doing exactly the same work and multiplying.
Absolutely. So more on that, like that role of a pastor transcend. If the one of the things that I keep in the forefront of my mind is a picture that's painted in Revelation chapter 7, where John, the apostle writing Revelation, sees a multitude of people of every tribe, nation, and tongue. And so if God really did establish a church, which he did, and that church is the bride of Christ, and he established the office of pastor, which he did in the scriptures, then that role transcends any culture there.
Right.
And it looks different in different circumstances, but the basic elements you can put in Norway, America, Russia, Africa, and you can find a pastor in all of those cultures. So that was really cool. Do you want to speak into some of the things you were talking about?
I would just add and emphasize that there's definitely overlap between what are, the picture that comes to mind when we say evangelism. There's overlap between that and what we are setting out to do here in Norway. The thing that it's not like it sets it apart, but it's just the specific thing that we're kind of hung up on or whatever. The thing that we love to talk about is the long game vision that we, in conversations with each other and in prayer and just considering this whole ministry, the long game focus of us raising up Norwegian pastors, and that being a form of evangelism. So in the short term, obviously there's going to be like overlap, and we do the things that we typically think of for evangelism. But when we think of church planning, we regard that as an evangelistic strategy. So I don't know. I think that's just an important thing to clarify. When we say church planning, that's our long game of evangelism. And I think
so let's talk about that. So there's one of the ways we put it before we left is there are a couple different ways a church can grow. You can tell me where this came from. I'm not exactly sure where this came from.
Sure.
But there are churches that could grow by addition, or in churches that could grow by multiplication. And so the churches we are very familiar with are addition churches. And so I want to talk about different types of church planning in a second, but kind of you guys speak into that kind of distinction. What's the difference between a church that grows by addition and a church that grows by multiplication?
Yeah, so this is a distinction that's brought out by the group Exponential, which is I don't even know how to describe them, a church planting ministry, and they're excellent. In fact, I've done a lot to inspire what it is that we're doing here. And they identify ways that churches can grow. So you can experience negative growth, which is negative growth, right? It means people are leaving.
Means people are leaving, yeah.
And that's probably most of the churches in the United States, or maybe in the world, but definitely in the United States, are on slow decline as the membership leaves, moves away, dies, whatever. You can grow by addition, which is more people come to your church. So we are, I don't know, pick a name of a church. We're Steve's Church. That's a dumb name for a church. We're Steve's Church. And Steve's Church grows by addition.
Sorry, listeners named Steve.
If your name's Steve, just don't open a church called Steve's Church. Use your name, like if you're going to use your name in a title of something, do a better thing. Anyways,
I gotcha.
You can grow by addition, which is like if your city is growing and more people are coming to your church. So you have a location, you have a program, or a set of programs and ministries and a staff and all of that. So what we're used to in church, and it's in growth, which is good. That's good if your church is growing. You can also grow by multiplication, which is to say that your church is not just focused necessarily on having one location, but you are growing Steve's church by adding a satellite venue, maybe in another place, in a city nearby. So you still have the same organization, the same structure, the same mission, the same values. You're still the same church, but you are adding new places for people to come and join and be members and family and worship together. Then you can grow exponentially, which almost no churches do, especially in the United States and other places. The fellows who inspired me were a couple of pastors from India who are doing this. In other places, like, it just has to be the model. There's nothing else you can do. But the idea is not merely that you are Steve's church that is growing by adding venues, locations, services, things like that, but that you are a church that plants churches that plant churches that plant churches, and they come out from underneath your umbrella of operation. So they can have a different vision and a different strategy and a different mission, all that can all live under the umbrella of healthy church planting and church formation, evangelism, and all of that. But you can have a different focus. So you have. I'm not going to get going because I want to keep talking about it and why that's a good thing. But the idea is that you can grow exponentially, and that's what we want to do. And the important thing about being an exponentially growing church is that it has to be built into your DNA and your operating system from the ground. It's almost impossible to turn a church that isn't already focused on being exponential. It's almost impossible to turn it into one that becomes exponential. Now, they can plant churches that are exponential, and I'm not here to sort of talk about the methodology or whatever of the exponential people, but all of that to say, we are interested and excited about churches that plant churches that plant churches that plant churches that plant churches.
So the distinction would be, especially because of the part of the world where we're from in the U.S. Not only is there a church on every corner, there's a mega church in hundreds of mega churches.
We invented it, man. It started in our neighborhood. Yeah,
yeah. And so there's this kind of phenomenon that kind of happened, especially in the 21st century. This idea of like multi-site churches, and so and not even like. In some of the circles that I run in, like at least online, that's like low hanging fruit to criticize like big rock star churches for having multi-site churches. But the truth is that there are some big mega churches that are really biblically faithful that have great Bible teachers that do multi-site. So like, what would be the distinction between like the Village Church, right? Has like 3 different sites, or at least they did in like 2008 when I heard Matt Chandler say that. So like, what's the difference between like a big church that has like 20,000 members and 3 different sites, and then what you're saying, a church that plants churches that plants churches?
Yeah, that's tough. So the distinction isn't necessarily about how many people you have or how many sites you have necessarily, right? So the multi-site thing, it took the world by storm, and sort of the Americans learned how to do it from the Koreans. But what happened was technology allowed us to reach more people through wires. You install the right kind of wire or the right kind of dish, and now you can reach a whole lot more people without having to multiply your staff, which was really excellent. So how many sites you have necessarily isn't the thing, and I know you know that. The idea is that you can grow a church, call it Steve's Church, and Steve's Church can now be multi-site, but you're still that one same church organization. And as that continues to grow, it becomes more difficult to steer or to change course or something. So what a multiplicative or an exponential, call it model. I don't even want to say, it's not really a model. It's more something that you're dedicated to. But on that vision, the churches that get planted sort of can never be too close together. You're always focused on evangelism and not on transfer growth from other churches. Your fishing pool, as it were, is the lost people in your community. And if you stay small, so you're not focused on adding a new site to an existing organization. If you have if you're dedicated to not doing that, or you can be committed to smallness. I'm trying to be careful. I don't want to make it sound like a small church is good for its own sake. I'm not saying that at all. There are plenty of terrible small churches and plenty of excellent, really, really big ones.
Of course.
So I'm not making that distinction at all. However, the smaller a boat is, the easier it is to turn, right? So what you can do is, maybe I can explain it the best with an example. So suppose we've got a church and there are a couple of hundred of us, and 20 of us say, listen, we really sense of need and urgency and are committed and passionate about reaching the homeless in our community. And so we want to serve them. We want to show them the love of Jesus. We want to evangelize to them in that context. And we all kind of live close together, and we want that to be our focus. Like, how do we reach the outcast in our society? It's harder as a church of 200 to make. First of all, that might not be the mission that God has this church on. But if we're going to like steer and pivot that way, that's a big ship to move. Well, if those 20 people, if we can bless them and we can say, that's awesome, I'm glad that God is calling you to do that, and we can bring it to our membership and say, hey, we need 20 people to go and do this thing. And here are resources, and here's training, and here's everything you need to start, so that you that's what we call it, church planting. You're planted in healthy soil and a healthy bed that is rich in nutrients and the things you need for life. And then we can bless you as you go. And then your spiritual focus is that community that you've just identified. And then you leave the authority of the main church. You establish a pastor who is accountable to God. And you can establish church networks and relationships and families of churches, which is fine, but they are no longer part of Steve's church. They are now doing this other thing that maybe Steve's church wasn't called to, right? Ours can have another focus. And then out of that church that now has sort of left the mothership, that church, they can do exactly the same thing. So when they have you foster an environment where it is not only safe but encouraged to take the talent that has been developed in that rich soil, take that talent and go do the same thing in another place that's not currently being reached. So we're always looking for opportunities to reach unreached people and to grow there. Is that I feel like I over-explained it. That's kind of,
I think I'd add that the kind of big motivator for us here with like planting churches that plant churches is churches that have that mindset. I think just automatically have a mindset that's set up to remember, like the past couple of weeks we've talked about evangelism and the gospel and why those are necessary for the Christian to keep at the front of their minds. And I think that like church planning structure helps to keep the weight of the gospel on their shoulders. Yeah. So like my job doesn't become replaced by, or the job of evangelism doesn't get replaced by things for the benefit of my church. Instead, I need to raise up a new pastor here in Norway who has his focus as evangelism, and teaching a new guy to have that same focus. So I think just to me, the big distinction would be that just the system itself kind of keeps the weight of the gospel heavy. Like in order for, if our goal is to plant churches that plant churches, then the way that we do that is evangelism and the gospel getting out to new people. Right. And if that's not happening, then we're never going to plant new churches or raise up new pastors. So yeah, I think I just had that's the big... Yeah.
So there's so much there's so much to say about all of that. But so I think that's one of the advantages that we see being evangelistically focused. So we've talked before about how much of the growth in a lot of churches in the United States is fueled, they call it transfer growth. It's fueled by people leaving other churches or people moving to town or something like that. And that's fine. Like, we want healthy churches. And if there's a church that is unhealthy or unbiblical or led by a false teacher or something, like, we want people to leave that church and find spiritual family in a healthy church. So that is, like, I'm not criticizing that one bit. However, that's not what God has called us to necessarily. Our call is to evangelism. We've got lost people. So we want lost people to be connected to healthy churches. And you guys know my dad is fond of saying that an object at rest, or an object in motion, it's easier to, oh gosh, I feel stupid, you're totally missing. But an object at rest tends to stay at rest. Yeah. So,
Newton said that.
What's that?
Isaac Newton said
Newton said
that.
But my dad, he co-opted it for this conversation. But the idea is, we want to see people get saved and connected to a healthy church. And then if they're part of that church, and they find another church that suits them better, there are lots of reasons why, then that's fine. But we want to see people get into the kingdom. Our main goal is not necessarily being the church that people who are already Christians can find and be plugged into a healthy place, although we definitely want that to identify us. We want to be identified, or we want to be characterized by lost people getting saved.
And I think that's such an important clarification because that concept is pretty foreign, like we've been talking about, like where we're from. So I've been getting questions, and I know you guys have been getting those questions too because we've talked about it.
Yeah.
People are like, well, so we know you're planning a church, but what's your evangelistic strategy?
Yeah.
And the answer is that is the evangelistic strategy,
Yeah.
which is not typically the answer in America. Like we're familiar with, like we said, we plant a church in America, and we get as many people as we can in the building. And when we have too many people, we tear the building down and we build a new one that's bigger.
Yeah.
And rinse and repeat, right?
Yeah.
And so I love the kind of concept that you introduced and you just kind of finished, where staying small, planting churches that stay small, and I think that's the distinction too, like having independent congregations with their own pastor and their own elders, and that because those are now different churches. And so that is the evangelistic strategy. And so let's.
Can I say something about that real quick?
I was going to say, let's talk about that more.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. So sorry, I would have interrupted you, but I'm glad this is not an interruption. So smallness, of course, is not the goal. Maybe smallness is a part of the strategy. There's a recognizing that there is an advantage to being maneuverable, and there's an advantage to being dedicated to smaller, more deliberate tasks. Something like that. So I love how you put that. Like that is our evangelistic strategy. And by the way, missiologists have known this forever. Like church planting has always been the best evangelistic strategy, and it's not even close. Like if you want to reach people with the gospel, you plant churches. There are a lot of reasons for that, including you tend to people who leave and plant churches tend to be entrepreneurial and risk takers and sort of outside of the box thinkers. And there's if you have. We can all think of the stodgy old church that refuses to change its ways, but sometimes we don't see that exact same impulse in the church that we're a part of, where it feels like we're dynamic and we're flexible and we're able to pivot and reach our community. That's less and less true. As you are focused on a specific mission. So if your mission has you going sort of full speed ahead in one direction, you really don't have the opportunity to pivot, which is okay. You can be on that mission, and the kingdom needs that. However, there's another mission which is characterized by the ability to be flexible and maneuverable in ways that other churches just can't be. So, we can look forward to constantly training and sending people, just constantly. I heard pastors who say we tithe on everything, including 10% of our income and 10% of our people, we send to plant and launch churches every year. So they're less concerned with having a perfectly polished set of programs for their institution organization on Sunday and throughout the week, and more focused on how do we train people to be spiritually healthy, to be spiritual leaders, so that we can go and do evangelism. We can go and represent Christ well, and we can present the salvation and the salvific work of Christ and salvation in His name to the world that doesn't know that already. Yeah,
and I think just considering the style of church that we're used to, every church has to find the balance between evangelism and discipleship, and I just see the church that we're used to is so perfect at plugging new people in to a thriving Christian community,
right?
Which is I think a deficit that we see with the church planning focus that we have.
Right.
It's going to be a challenge to have a thriving community that the style of church that we're used to. You have a youth group, a men's group, and all of that stuff, and you can find a perfect spot for every single new person.
You already have momentum.
Yeah.
And you can just throw more people in the thing that's already I guess I was going to mix really bad metaphors, but you got the boulder's already rolling down the hill, right? You can introduce people to it, and you've already got momentum, and you're moving forward. Yeah.
And there's a lot of room for discipleship, because you have tons of different opportunities to train people up.
You have a budget.
Yeah.
You have an office. You have bookshelves.
Yeah. You have buildings.
You have buildings.
We
That's
have a garage.
Yeah.
So I think there's just obviously any style of church, the goal is to walk that line between evangelism and discipleship. But for our context in Norway, we evangelism has to be the focus because we don't have just the numbers.
Right.
If we tried to do that style of church with the 10 of us that God sent over here, then the math just doesn't work out.
Right. Yeah.
So
our youth group is my 3 children.
yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
And they're not even in middle school.
No,
so,
no,
yeah.
and they're 1, 5, and 8.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
and I love the just clarifying over and over, like for myself and for anyone else who asks me about it. Like I love clarifying that our evangelistic success or whatever isn't measured by like how many people I've had conversations with who I can now count as saved or anything.
Right.
It's right now it looks like my personal growth in understanding the culture and all of those things because down the line I have to be able to replicate myself and pastors have to come out of me and like all of that kind of stuff.
And it's hard to show the progress at home when it's like you sent us here to build houses, and right now we're like building tools. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, why are you chewing on that tree? It's like, well, I got to knock this tree down and I got to make a hammer out of it. And it's like, I know it's not obvious right now.
Yeah.
But that's the stuff that is critically important. So right now we're sort of building and sharpening our tools in order to, in service of being effective. I say eventually, hopefully soon, eventually. I think that's just to reiterate what you were saying.
Yeah, because pastors have to come from us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
I mean, that's heavy. That's heavy.
Which
You
is
can't-
insane.
Yeah. You can't overstate the gravity of that. I mean, you and Jacob and I were responsible to God Almighty someday for how we have discharged the responsibility that He's given us here, which includes hatching pastors, right? But that also,
even just to like make it even heavier, not just pastors have to come from us, churches have to come from us.
Yeah.
Like whole functional bodies dedicated to Christ and His work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's so. Yeah, it's terrifying. Which good, like all good kingdom work should be terrifying.
Yeah.
Because then God has to do it. If it doesn't terrify you and you can do it on your like no big deal, then what's the point? Like if you could have done it yourself anyways. Let's get God on board. But secondly, it's also thrilling, and that's what we've talked about. I think we keep coming back to the term pastor factory. Like we want our church and maybe it's an association of churches or like a network of churches eventually, but we call them our spiritual ancestors or spiritual. What's the opposite of an ancestor? Descendants.
Predecessor.
No, that's the same thing.
Posterity.
Dichotomy. We want our spiritual children and grandchildren, the churches that are planted out of the churches that we plant, etc. We want those to be dedicated to the task of producing pastors and producing churches, of course, but by identifying pastors and empowering them to go and do that work.
So I have so many thoughts about all of that. But one of them is kind of talking about that is when I was, when I was 13, that was like when I first got the kind of idea in my head that maybe God wanted me to be a pastor. And then that kind of call resurfaced in my life when I was like 18. And then I was like, okay, that's it. I'm going to absolutely do it. And my kind of conception of what that looked like, because of where I came from, was what every pastor looks like where I come from.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to go to CBU or Biola.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get a degree in something Christian related. And I'm going to apply at a church of like 3,000 people and get a job as the youth pastor and then work my way up to the senior pastor. And so that's just kind of like was the natural way to go for me. Was like, okay, well, that's what's being a pastor is going to look like for me. But here, that whole concept of like now we have to train other pastors who go plant churches and do all of this is just such a radically different kind of conception. And so
I mean, we have the template, especially in California. I mean, we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to
we really
biblical churches, solid seminaries. I mean, there aren't very many left, but we've got a handful of them in California. We are blessed with people who want to lead God's flock, are capable, educated, discipled, and we have the format down. We have the format. I mean, we don't have any. Well, that's not to say we don't have any of that here, but we're pursuing something that's different. That largely God is expecting us to design. which is on the one hand, again, it's like everything. It's incredible and terrifying, but it's also really thrilling because we have the opportunity to see what that would look like in this context. And I think that we have another advantage, and that is because we don't expect ourselves to be Norwegian, that we don't have to assume that burden, and we also don't have to feel like we're the American saviors who need to teach them how to do it right. What we need to do is spiritually equip and empower the pastors whom God is already calling for them to then be relevant and they don't really have to contextualize. They're already a part of the culture, right? So we don't have to expect ourselves to be.
Yeah.
So how is that? We've touched on this a little bit. I want to get to some hypothetical practical stuff. How is this? I know, right?
Yeah.
How is that an evangelistic strategy? So we've talked about, that's great. You want to train pastors. That's great. You want to plant churches. That's great. You want to grow exponentially. That's awesome. How is that an evangelistic strategy? Because I'm playing advocate. I'm playing Steve, the American advocate.
Steve.
Because when I think of evangelism, I'm picturing people on the street handing out gospel tracts or preaching the gospel to them, right? Like Ray Comfort, right?
Yeah.
We love you, Ray. We do. We love Ray. It's so like that's what I'm picturing when I think of evangelism. How is what you guys are talking about an evangelistic strategy?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Yeah.
I would just start with it. What I kind of said already. It keeps the urgency of the gospel at the forefront of the Christian's mind, or at least helps to. We can't obviously make that happen consistently, but I think by design, having a churches that plant churches focus keeps us knowing that in order to multiply, we have to be, every single member of our church has to be going out and sharing the good news.
Right.
And if every single member, like we can't have anyone, like we talked about last week, we can't have anyone sitting on the bench. There's no option for a bench here. We need every single church member, whether they're gifted at singing or gifted at strumming a banjo or gifted at cooking.
No banjos.
Sorry.
Pick anything else.
Oh my god!
Or gifted at cooking.
Country music is actually pretty big here, but yeah.
Like no matter our gifting, every member that we have in our churches has to be engaged in evangelism.
Yeah, that's to say, none of the stuff that you said, Jacob, like when we talk about evangelism, we imagine this list of things. Like none of that necessarily goes away. You still have to, as a church body, you're committed to those kinds of things. So we're not saying something like, well, we're going to plant a church instead of telling people the gospel. It's like, no. We are focused on those things. But because of the sort of church planning model and method that we have under consideration, we can, it's natural to stay focused on the evangelism. So, I think I've probably said enough about that, but I think that it poises us and orients us toward the goal of evangelism, in which, like I said, missiologists have known forever. Planting churches is the best form of evangelism, and evangelizing is the best way to plant new churches. And what it helps you to do is always keep your focus on delivering the gospel to the people who don't know it and need to hear it.
Yeah, to me, it centers around this principle that we talked about on a previous episode, that everything the church does should be centered around evangelism.
Right.
So to me, I think that if you ask most churches, especially where we're from, like if they agree with that statement or if that's what they do, a lot of churches will say yes.
Yeah, of course.
And that's good. We want churches to...
Yeah, nobody says now we're not into...
Yeah. Yeah. If your church says no to that question, you should really think about it.
Yeah.
Think about it. So if you ask most churches about that, they'll say yes. But I think one of the advantages about planting young churches with like new pastors and keeping it...
And by young, you don't mean, to make clear, we don't mean like young in age necessarily.
No,
you mean young in
like
as in
new
newness.
churches.
Yeah.
A church splits not into multi-sites, but with a new pastor and all that. So one of the advantages of that is that that can be the motivator for the whole church is evangelism. Like when I look in the book of Acts, I see people doing a church service. So they get together, they sing songs, and they have a meal and all that stuff. Like churches do now, where we get together, we sing worship, and we take communion.
Yeah.
But afterwards, they would go to the synagogues and they would go street preaching and the Bible says that they were adding to their number every day those that were being saved. It's a church that was characterized by evangelism, not characterized necessarily by their programs or by their size or by their name or by their awesome youth group, but it was characterized by evangelism. And so I'm really passionate about having those things, having things like a youth group, having great music and stuff like that.
Yeah, if you're going to do it for Jesus and do it well.
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to have my cake and eat it too. Like I want all of those things. But I don't want people to see that and be like, that church has an awesome band. I want people to look at our churches, and say, they're weird. Like every day they go out and are loving and kind and tell me like I'm a sinner separated from God, and I need Jesus. But I want our churches characterized by that. I'm like, do you go to the church? Not that has a great youth group, not that has a great music, but you go to the church that preaches all the time and aren't like weird, like are normal people and but live with outpouring and love and evangelism. That's what I want our churches characterized by. And in the biz, the kind of big $3 two words for it are missional community.
In the biz.
Yeah. So, did you like
dumb.
that?
That was so bad.
I thought it was fun. It was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Bailey, I know that this is like your favorite thing ever. I'm building you up now. How about you? What the heck is missional community? What is that?
Yeah, that's tough. I think I'll read a definition that we agreed on, and then we can go from there.
Yeah,
we
stole it straight from Todd. So.
Yeah, and it's one of those like you were getting into at the beginning of the episode. Like it's filled with a lot of words that just sound like a word salad. But maybe we can break those down and make some kind of sense. And definitely Todd will. So missional community. Looks like every member living a missional life, intentionally loving and serving their community in step with the Spirit, demonstrating the gospel and proclaiming the love and salvation of Jesus to the people in their lives.
Yeah.
So, sounds awesome. But there's so much like packed into all those words.
Let's break that down a little bit. So,
well, maybe I'll explain it in fewer words. And it's something like evangelism in the natural context of normal life. So it's not focused necessarily on events and inviting people to things. It's focused on how do I live out the truth of the gospel, which we've talked a lot about, right? If we understand the gospel, it changes you. How do I live out the gospel in such a way that I'm able to make friends with lost people and represent Jesus to them? That's what it is. How can I be the reaching hand of Jesus to these people and invite them into the salvation that Jesus won for us? So it is, it focuses on, again, natural life rhythms. How am I an evangelist always? And never forsaking the use of words. How is it that I'm evangelist in my life, reflecting the truth and love of Jesus and serving my community, etc. And constantly. And how do I make real, natural, sincere friendships with people and then invite them? Remember, I've talked a lot about it. God's plan for the universe was relational, and he had a relationship among the Trinity, and he invited us into it, and we broke it, and then he unbroke it and has now accepted us into this relationship. How is it that we invite more people into this loving family relationship with God Almighty in a sincere, natural, through the course of me living my life? Like I dedicate my life to that purpose. And how does that happen? So I use way more words. I said I was going to break it down than I didn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me contrast that kind of with what we see like in America. And I am the chief among sinners. I'm not, I'm going to maybe say some pointed things, but I'm mostly talking about myself. Okay. And if this applies to you, repent. But so kind of in America, I especially as a teenager, definitely fell into the rhythm of like, I have my Jesus face on when I'm at church, and when I'm at school, I have my class clown, like, I don't know, trying to be cool, trying to be funny, like face, trying to impress people. When I'm at home, I have my like video game face, or like honor my parents face, or not honor my parents face. You know, like we have all these different masks that we put on, and we try and pretend like when I'm at church, well, how often do I read my Bible? Well, not as much as I should, or not as much as I wanted to.
Yeah.
And so I can definitely relate to not, or rather I should say, failing in a call that Jesus puts on all of our lives in living kind of that out, what you were saying.
Yeah, we're definitely used to saving the Jesus stuff for Sunday.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, there's so much.
Say it.
I think just continuing with using church that we're used to try to clear up what we mean when we say missional community and all those things. I'd say the focus of church that we're used to tends to be the thriving community to welcome people into and to disciple and raise up and give opportunities of ministry to the people that are there. I think the focus of missional community is thriving personal lives, and like making sure that every individual is living as an evangelist. Like just again, that the weight of the gospel, like the urgency of the gospel, is always at the forefront of the Christian's mind. Like if the church that we're used to is super focused on making sure that we have a thriving community for people, the missional community picture that we're talking about is obsessed with making sure that our Christians in our church are living true, fully gospel committed lives, like every moment. So, and it's a really tough like distinction to make, because again, every church is trying to do the same thing ultimately.
Well, that's what.
But it's
going
just
to that, like mask thing I was talking about, like what it kind of sounds like that we are pursuing is that church mask is just our actual face. It's in every part of our life.
Yeah.
So that's.
But every church says they want to do that too, right? Remember, you're not just a Christian on Sunday. We need to be Christians for the rest of the week. Everyone wants to do that. But I think that maybe this is a more committed, sort of holistic idea of like what are we doing with our lives? Like if your life on earth is to make friends, that's good. But if those friends are going to hell, then I mean, forgive me for being kind of crass, but you've wasted your life on them. Like we have eternal life to look forward to, and it's going to be with or without God. And so if you are not spending your life sharing the gospel of salvation with everyone that you know, if your life doesn't reflect that, and if it's not attractive to those who would hear it, right? Like if you're not doing that, then what's the point of how you're living? Church isn't so. We've talked about this for a long time as a church. Is church a hospital or is it a school? And it's both. And so of course it's messy and there are the gray and foggy areas and distinctions to be made. But I'll just say two things. First is every church says that they want to do that, right? We want to know what we want is to be Christians in our lives, but there's a sense in which we're all used to the routine of church being the place where we go to feel close to God on Sunday. And it's like, okay, like I've checked the box. I've done the thing I need to do in order to be in the club. And missional community, the focus is, I'll say slightly different. It might be sort of radically different, but I'm asking like, the church is something the community does on Sunday. It's not something that I go to, and missional community invests me in being a part of a body, which is again, smallness is not good for its own sake. When you are trying to be a church body with many thousands of other people, maybe it's harder to see where you fit, and it's easier to leave yourself out. When you are committed to deeply committed to a small number of people. Like it's obvious when you're gone, and you can see how we all depend on each other. And I'm convinced that God made us, like the reason he gifted us differently and the reason that we're referred to as a body is so that we will depend on each other and that we will need one another and one another's gifts.
Yeah, we can use, this podcast as like a mini example because you actually said to us off camera, of course, but
oh, good.
A couple weeks ago, you said if this podcast doesn't facilitate us being closer with each other or being closer to God, if it doesn't facilitate our personal holiness and that, we will destroy this whole show and tear this whole thing
Yeah,
down.
we'll stop that. If it
Yeah.
ends up being like, if the podcast ends up being an impediment to ministry and our spiritual growth, then why would we not throw it away? Right?
Yeah.
Like, why would we tolerate that in our lives?
Well, and
Yeah.
the principle there is not that people should do podcasts. The principle, of course, is that the podcast isn't the thing we're focused on. What we're focused on is the mission
Right.
and community
Yeah.
together, and not necessarily the event itself. Even though the event is fun and
Yeah.
fine, but that's more the focus. And so,
Yeah.
I love that. Were you going to say anything?
No, I mean, the only thing I think I'd add is we mainly, I think, talked about the distinction between, or like for the individual Christian, between church that we're used to and missional community. But I think as far as like the individual churches themselves, flexibility is another big differentiating point between the two. So kind of like you mentioned earlier, a small group, a small missional community of 50 or so, if they realize that in their community, like literally, if they all live within a mile of each other, and in their community there's a middle school that needs support,
Right.
then they can be very flexible and focus on supporting their community in that way. So I think that's just in looking at the church as a whole, a big differentiating point is
Right.
like that it's tough to get the whole big church to make that middle school their focus, but a small group of 50 people can dedicate one day a week where they show up and bring lunch to the kids and eat lunch and talk with the kids,
Right.
that kind of stuff. So I think just for a church-wide perspective, flexibility is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
Well, that's something that Benta told us.
Yeah.
I can't exactly remember if she said it on the episode when we had her on, but when we had dinner with her at her place, and I asked her, what do you think? How exactly did I put it? It was something along the lines of like, what do you think like the God's global church in Norway needs? Like, what do you think is like kind of wrong necessarily with the church in a broad sense, and what does the church in Norway need? And one of the things she said is that the reason why churches get stale, or the reason why they stop growing and maybe sometimes die, is because they refuse to change.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's what she said.
Yeah.
And I haven't stopped thinking about that since I heard it from her, and I find that very, very interesting.
Right.
And it kind of seems like one of the things that we're talking about, and what we hear when we talk to Norwegian Christians about it, like Benta, is that she is passionate about those missional community ideals, a church that lives its life to be like exactly what you're saying. Like, if there's a group of people that aren't reaching like middle schoolers or a youth group, and they're like, okay, well, their mindset shouldn't be let's pack it up. Their mindset should be, what do we have to do to get the gospel to those
Right.
people? Yeah.
Well, and so the idea is this. So there's a sense in which it's right not to be flexible and not to want to change. Right? If God has given a vision and a mission to a pastor and to this congregation to fulfill, then you shouldn't be willing to make every turn and go, let's try this thing.
Yeah.
No, let's try this thing. Like, you should not be you know, like the bowling ball hitting the bumpers.
That's fair. I do not mean like
No, of course
hoping
not.
to change
No.
like the deity of Christ is a lie. No,
No,
not
so,
at
so
all.
yeah, so the point is, and I know that this is not what you said.
There's
or
of
meant.
course a line. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you shouldn't be
So
able
that-
to
so-
change for anything.
Right. So of course we mean the unwillingness to be flexible. So all of that to say, the point is not we can then go chase every rabbit that comes in front of our eyes. We go chase that thing down and kill it. Then we can chase the next thing. It's no. The mission that we're called to, that we then will be unwilling to waver from, is that we can launch smaller boats.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We can launch smaller boats that can go chase that thing down, and that's a part of the mission. So part of the direction that our mission is already going is to be growing big enough that we can then divide and we can focus our attention, the attention of the churches that we plant, and those are usually geographic. So it's something like, we're coming from all over Oslo for this one missional community or whatever. Well, we can sort of specialize by location. Well, it turns out 10 of us live closer to each other. Like 10 of us are on the east side and 10 of us are on the west side. Well, now, once there's enough of us, we've got 20 people, we've got 10 on each side, then okay, we divide. We make sure that the groups both have healthy leadership in place, and then we do everything in our power to help them to launch and to persist in health. And then they can further, then they can divide by southwest and southeast and northeast and northwest. And so those delineations are usually geographic, but they can also be, like we've talked about before, they can be in the particular missional focus. Right, the 10 of us have a desire to reach musicians with a coffee shop with live music. Like that's going to be our focus, and we're going to do church in that context. I don't know if that's a good or a bad idea. That might be a really bad one, but we can still, supposing it's a good one, we have this really good idea. Okay, well, we can foster and nurture that really good idea, and then you guys can focus on that. And that does not demand that the rest of the however many hundreds of us there are at this point in various missional communities, like we don't all have to move. You can then sort of you can make that turn yourselves, and then be committed to the same thing.
Yeah, and I think it just affords those missional communities to immerse themselves genuinely in the communities that they're already rooted in, the physical places and the relationships God's already set them up with. They don't need to go and move across the world.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
Their job is to be immersed in the community and to be witnesses there.
Yeah. Well, it's a hard question to answer when people ask us, why did you come from America?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. But if we show up here and we're I don't know, we're cleaning up a park. Why did you come here from California to clean a park? Well, because Jesus loves you. That's a real hard connection to make. But if there are people in the community who live on that block anyways, and they go, why are you cleaning this park? And because we're part of this community and Jesus loves it, and we want it to be clean, and we want it to be an excellent space for us and for our neighbors, and because we want to share the love of God with and among our people. And that makes sense, and that's compelling for people. It's a lot less weird and culty than we came from California to show you Jesus' love by cleaning a Norwegian, you know what I mean? It's not. Yeah. It's all true. It's all true, and it's good and it's valuable. But it makes a lot less sense to someone who's here.
Yeah, it just poises that community to find, to identify, and then set out on the most effective way to meet their community where they're at,
and according to where they're at in their place in life, and their gifts and their talents and their desires and their passions, and literally the home that they live in. They can contextualize all of that to the project of their neighborhood. And think of how freeing that is. Your goal doesn't have to be, I'm going to save the world. Your goal is, I'm going to share Jesus with everybody that is anywhere near me, with the hope of leading some to the salvation of Christ, and then helping, starting the fire in their heart that they can be a part of a community that does the same thing. And you can be focused on your growth and your community without, I'm overwhelmed by big tasks, without being overwhelmed going, oh my gosh, we're in Norway, there are 5 million people here and 499,000 of them don't know Jesus. How are we going to do that? Well, we do it by means of, I think, missional community, which we've talked about. And that is kind of the buzzword. There are lots of things you can call it. And that one has gotten a little that one, it's we've said it enough times that it doesn't sound like a word anymore. The church in general has said that enough times it doesn't sound. But I think we will be focused on that thing. And then we can be focused on the health of our communities and launching others to do the same thing. And then maybe a little bit at a time in an Amway kind of way. So Amway,
oh my gosh.
You sign up, if you sign up 6 of your friends and they sign up 6 of their friends, in 5 generations, that's every person on earth is an Amway.
Everyone's supposed to go down this road.
But you get to be your own boss, Cam.
You get to be your boss. So that's fine. Whatever. That's not an opinion about Amway. It's just about exponential.
But it kind of is.
Exponential. No. But so it's not that. That's just to say that there really is wisdom and growth like that, right? So maybe I don't know how well it scales to the world of selling products that Amway does, but when we apply that same thing, we can say, listen, if I can reach and really reach the people in my community, if Jesus had a dozen disciples, he's like, look, if I can share my life with these ones and then teach them and command them to go and do the same thing. And then each of those can take on a manageable number of disciples, and they can be real community with each other, who can then go and reach people and make a certain number of disciples. It's not that many generations before real real changes made. And then you have that momentum that we were talking about before, and you have the momentum maybe on a national scale and eventually on a continent-wide and global scale. I mean, I think that really is. I think for me that's the way of going about the mission that we talked about in the last episode. Like, to me, that's what really holds my heart.
And here's the fun part.
Yeah.
Especially for the viewers at home, after listening to about 40-ish minutes, 45-ish minutes of us talking about this. Fun part is we still have a ton to learn.
Oh, man.
Exactly how that applies.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like this episode especially, I was definitely just listening more to you guys, because this is not, like I touched on earlier, this is not something that I dreamed of when I envisioned God calling me into ministry, pastoral ministry, that is.
Me either.
And so that's totally fair, especially from the context we come from. But the cool thing is next week, we're actually going to be having an expert.
Yeah,
on
the
missional
expert
community,
maybe, yeah.
The expert. His name will be Todd Moore. His name is right now
It is
Todd
still,
Moore.
it probably still
and
will
be Todd Moore when he's on.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have him on next week. We're going to interview him about missional community. And so I could definitely learn more about exactly what it is I'm doing here.
I feel like we've sort of insufficiently scratched the surface, but Todd is the expert. He's done tons of church planting, leadership, missional community stuff in Europe. So I'm very eager for us to be able to talk with him, and he'll be able to definitely shore up our for sure deficiencies in talking about what we're
Absolutely. So I'm looking forward to that. You definitely don't want to miss that. So please tune in next week for an interview with Todd Moore. God bless. Thank you for watching this episode of Word First Radio. If you like the podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to learn more about Word First and how you can support the ministry spiritually and financially, check out the links in the description below. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Word First Radio, and we'll see you again next week. God bless.